All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that happens in theater classes all the time, but we don't really talk about how it works. We're going to crack open what's called the black box of theater. So picture a theater class, right? You see what goes in. People are walking around, they're playing these kind of weird games. That's the input. And you definitely see what comes out. Better acting, more presence, more confidence. That's the output. But what on earth is happening in the middle? Well, for most people, that whole process is a total black box. It's a term that comes from engineering, you know? It describes a system where you can see the inputs, you can see the outputs, but everything happening on the inside, it's a complete mystery. How does playing a game somehow magically turn into a real, tangible skill? Okay, so to figure out what's inside this box, we first have to get a handle on where the box itself came from. And believe it or not, it's got this really fascinating, complex history that goes back more than 100 years. Yeah, so the modern theater exercise didn't just pop up overnight. It started way back in the early 1900s with Stanislavski. He created his system to give actors a real craft, something more than just, imitating people. Then, from the 20s to the 50s, that system traveled and split. You got professional method acting on one side, and on the other, creative dramatics for kids. Fast forward to the 60s and 70s, and pioneers like Grotowski started focusing way more on the body, using these intense exercises to break down creative blocks. And that brings us to today, where all these different threads are kind of mashed together in the classroom. The problem? We often lack a clear language to explain how or why any of it works. And that's really where the black box problem begins. So how do we finally get inside this thing? Well, some fantastic research by Tina Maria Renese gives us the keys. And the very first step is a big one. We have to stop thinking of an exercise as just a list of rules and start seeing it as something alive. And that first key has a name: assemblage. This idea suggests that an exercise is so much more than just a teacher and some students following directions. It's a whole living, breathing system. Think about it. You've got the teacher, the students, the room itself, the goals for the day, even all the past experiences everyone is carrying with them. It all comes together to form one dynamic, living thing. And inside this assemblage, the different parts don't just interact with each other like separate objects. No, they interact. It's a different concept. They are completely entangled, constantly shaping and defining one another. The research offers this brilliant analogy. Think of it like a company's private intranet, where everything is built to work together, not the wide open internet where things just happen to link to each other. It's a closed, deeply connected loop. Now, all of this interaction creates something you can almost feel in the air. It's called the sensory field. This is that shared atmosphere, that collective focus, that nonverbal buzz of energy in the room. And it's not just some abstract idea. It's a real, palpable field of communication that every single person is both feeling and contributing to. It's like the vibe of the room, but with actual functional power. And listen to this. This quote from someone in one of the workshops just shows how incredibly powerful that sensory field can get. They said, "If someone had walked into the room, I wouldn't have noticed. You were so in your own world. That's amazing. The immersion was so complete that the rest of the world just faded away." They weren't just acting anymore, they were totally in. Okay, so we've got this buzzing, interconnected system, this assemblage, and it's creating this intense sensory field. Great. But how does all of that actually produce a skill? Where does the learning, spark? The answer lies in a process the research identifies as immersive self-learning. This is key. The students aren't just being lectured at or passively taught. Instead, the exercise is designed to create a space where they can literally step inside the knowledge, embody it, and experience it for themselves directly. They are literally learning from the inside out. And let's make this more concrete with some examples from the study. The researchers looked at 4 really different exercises. You've got one that's all about immersing in a fantasy world. Another is about creating an inner as-if space. Then you have group exercises, which are about focusing on a simple shared goal. But here's the fascinating part. Even though they all look totally different on the surface, they were all being used to teach the exact same skill: scenic presence. This reveals something crucial. Every exercise has a kind of life cycle. Step 1, you just learn the exercise. You master the rules of the game itself. Then, step 2, you start to use that game to explore and master the actual acting skill. But, and this is so important, step 3 is that once it gets too easy, the exercise has to change or be thrown out completely. Because if you're not being challenged, you're not learning. Stagnation is the absolute enemy here. And this quote from an advanced student just nails that final stage. Listen. The bubble becomes more elastic over the years. Suddenly you can start running. The bubble will follow. You have confidence in the bubble. Wow. So the exercise isn't a game anymore. It's become this internalized, totally reliable tool, this elastic bubble of focus that they own, that they trust, and that they can take with them into any performance. But, you know, this whole immersive learning thing, it's not a magic bullet. The black box can absolutely fail. If the exercise is way too hard or way too easy, it won't work. If the student doesn't even get why they're doing it, it's useless. And if their head is full of self-judgment or private memories or just a straight-up fear of messing up, the whole process just grinds to a halt. That amazing sensory field we talked about, it just collapses. Which brings us to what might be the single most crucial element in this entire system, the person who's ultimately responsible for making sure this box actually works, and that's the teacher. They're not just an instructor, they are the catalyst. The research gives us this really powerful way to think about the teacher's role, the difference between being a hoarder and a curator. A hoarder, well, they just collect exercises like recipes. They focus on just doing the activity, but the why is often missing. A curator, on the other hand, that's different. A curator knows the history and purpose of each exercise. They understand the knowledge that's baked into it, and they carefully select and combine them with real purpose to meet the actual needs of their students in that moment. This kind of curator teacher becomes what the research calls an Affektkatalysator. It's a German word that means a catalyst for affect, or for feeling and energy. They're not some drill sergeant standing on the sidelines shouting orders. No, they're inside the exercise with the students, actively managing the energy, guiding the focus, and helping to create the conditions for that immersive self-learning to actually happen. And look, this role is absolutely critical. Just to put it in perspective, data from Swedish cultural schools in 2022 showed that for every 10 music lessons, there was only about 1 theater lesson. We're talking 4 million versus 400,000. In a field that gets so much less time and attention, having teachers who are true catalysts, who can make every single moment of learning count, well, it's not just important, it's vital. All right, so we've looked at the history. We've peered inside the box. We understand this incredible system and the teacher's crucial role. So what's the one thing, the single most important tool that can finally turn theater teaching from a mysterious black box into a clear, transparent process? It all comes down to this, a shared language. Think about it, having specific professional words like assemblage, interaction, sensory field. It changes the entire game. It allows teachers and students to actually talk about what they're doing. It takes all that silent knowledge, that gut feeling, and turns it into real concepts you can work with. Suddenly, this invisible process of learning becomes visible. It lets you separate a technical problem with a skill from some kind of personal failing. And maybe most importantly, it gives everyone a toolkit to have a real conversation about the craft of teaching itself. And this really flips the whole problem on its head. The exercise doesn't have to be this confusing thing that gets in the way of a conversation. Instead, it can be the very thing that starts it. It can be the way into the conversation. So that leaves us with one last question to chew on. What other black boxes of learning are out there in our lives? I mean, think about things like learning to ride a bike, or developing a great sense of humor, or even gaining intuition in a sport. These are all complex skills we learn, often without any clear language to describe how it's all happening. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.